Hello and welcome today to our Fireside chat, where we're considering how technology is helping banks navigate the current challenging environment within the ALM space. I'm joined today by Olmo Vázquez. He's the CEO and founder of Mirai Advisory. Welcome, Olmo.
Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
Doing good, thank you. It's been an interesting few months, a year really, hasn't it? There's been a lot going on in the banking, the financial market space. And it's had a lot of change around ALM, and it's kind of interesting. ALM was something that people did, right? But now it's front and center, and it really is something that's driving the conversations that we have in the industry, both with the vendors like yourselves, the advisors, and the banks themselves, of course. So we sort of think back around what's been happening in the world. We've had all sorts of things going on. The market itself clearly is extremely volatile. That's kind of driven by growing and persistent and stubborn inflation, I think, is probably the best way to put it. I think this week inflation went down in the US. I'm sure next week it's going to go back up. It seems to be that kind of cycle right now. And obviously that's kind of driven by rates that, it's interesting when we say historically high rates, people like myself who've been around the markets forever, they're not historically high, right? No. But they're higher than they were for about 8 years, right? And of course, geopolitical issues. As you sit sort of as one of the key firms helping and advising the industry, what are your thoughts on what's happening in the world and those things that are driving it?
Okay, we are currently experiencing a volatile market environment, right? And we are seeing everyone with rising interest rates. As you said, that historical are not the highest one, but the last, we are taking a look to the last 15 years, that is not actually a common momentum for everyone. And I think also that the regulators are putting much more effort on the RBB and ALM management. And the banks now what are asking to different technology solutions, or to technology per se, is that we need to be much more flexible in terms of giving them the capabilities to make more assumption in less time. We should actually start integrating different views, like management or regulatory ones, that in the past were diverse. We should actually quickly adapt the regulatory changes that the regulators are demanding to the banks and so forth, right? And just yesterday, I was attending a conference in London, where a strategic consulting firm emphasized the importance of aligning, for example, the business vision, the RBB, and the regulatory aspect when we were talking about no-matrix deposit modeling, right? And in terms of doing so, the banks need more data, more dimensions, more qualitative dimensionality in their models, but also in their calculation engine. And I think that that's key for the coming years as well.
A very interesting point you just brought up actually at the end there, just thinking around it. One of the things that I used to be on the other side of the fence, actually building these platforms and institutions, right? And that need to have sort of not just the multi-dimensions, but you have to have the different views, but the different views based off the same data and the same consistency. I think one of the things the regulators are really looking at now is the way you're managing your institution the same way that your board and your regulators are being shown your institution, right? And that's back to your comment around, you have to have the data, you have to do multi-dimension, but you also have to be able to stress the dimensions of this in ways that are relevant to the industry, right? And not just disclosing what the regulator demands, but showing that you're actually inside your house much more frequent stress testing, much more, as you said, holistic stress testing, but also where I was kind of going to is while getting the nuts and bolts right.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
So it can't be an add-on, if you like, right? You can't do in your core system I do this, and over here I do this. Is that something you're seeing?
No, absolutely. But when we're talking about technology, I believe that the evolution of the last 10, 15 years are actually helping a lot to try to resolve this demanding or these issues that some banks were facing in the past, right? Because when we are talking about cloud native technologies that are designed to leverage the best of the cloud, and here it's important to differentiate being a cloud native and having a software in the cloud, because being a cloud native, is a way of designing and develop software, right? To leverage the capabilities of the cloud, right? And
can we explore that a bit for a second? It's something that we say a lot, that there's a real difference between cloud native and cloud available, right?
Yeah, that's key. Yeah.
And from your perspective, as you do this development stuff, what are the key things you think really make a difference?
Well, for example, starting from the architecture that you are using in a cloud native or a non cloud native, right? Is right now it's really common actually to start designing the software using microservices that will allow you to split your process in microprocess, if I can say that. You are going to be able actually to reach what we call horizontal scalability, that is quite different of vertical scalability, is a way of add additional computation engines to your solution with almost endless capacity, right? And for example, in some cases, you can observe drastically a reduction of calculation times coming from hours to minutes, right? And this is a combination of both things, right? Being in the cloud, but also the architecture and the way of designing the software, right?
It's interesting. The reason I was sort of going there is one of the things that we see a lot in the market is if you force your software onto the cloud, but you don't design it for the cloud, it actually becomes a very expensive application. Whereas if you design it for the cloud, you use the cloud in the way the cloud is meant to be used. So you get that flexibility, scalability, but you get it at a cost that isn't a bit of a sticker shock when the bill lands on the desk.
No. And when you are thinking about ALM, cloud make all sense, right? You don't need all your actually computation requirements all the time up, right? What we do is just to get the map when you need the power of the calculation, right? And you don't need that the 100% of the time. But for ALM or liquidity purpose, that makes all sense.
Yeah, it does. It's great. It's great to hear it. It's been one of my hobby horses for years that this needs to be done this way, and it's nice to hear it going that way. If we flip back to what the banks are looking at, and sort of some of the things that have happened of late, right? Obviously, I'm sitting across the United States, so we were somewhat front and center in the whole. Oh yeah, we forgot about BB, we forgot about it. And then people weren't looking at the duration yet. People weren't looking at some of the basics of ALM. But I think there were also some changes we saw in how it works. And I think it goes to some of the questions we were talking about earlier around flexibility. I can do all my basic stress tests, the industry required stress tests, and it wouldn't have told me anything because the holding periods were longer than the event happened in and that kind of thing. Do you think this shows us again that this need to be able to not just look holistically across, but to be able to look at different timelines, to be flexible about what you do, to be able to adapt and follow what the market's doing rather than going, well, I did the regulatory test, how could I know, right?
Yeah.
What do you think? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, makes totally sense. And for example, one of the cool thing of having the regulator to start looking to the ALM much more focus is that they're asking for doing much more analysis, right? And if you think about probably 1 year or 2 years ago, the parallel shock that probably all of the banks were doing was only 100 through 200, but in the last year, the rates goes up for more than 400%, and that's crazy, right? And we see we observe what happened with several cases in the US with Silicon Valley Bank, etc., right? And I think that the regulator is just asking them to move much more, doing much more scenarios in and actually asking for more regulatory reports, especially here in Europe as well, right? That the new guidelines are becoming public in 6 months, and the banks will be required to report additional reports with additional model, with additional scenarios, right? That put much more stress on the current teams and on the current tools that are available in the banks.
The word I picked up there was additional, right? So
no, absolutely. The kids say additional, yeah. It's always
not that
more.
anything else is going away, right? The LCR and stuff isn't going. They're not going anywhere. They just want you to do more with the same, right?
Yeah.
Which again, I think it's back to this question of how do you have that flexibility and how do you have that ability to something comes up and it's a new ask, maybe it's even a new risk factor. Is that where it comes back again to you've got to be holistic about this? You've got to have all the data available. You've got to be able to scale. Is that what we're seeing again?
No. I'm thinking about it on the technology view, right? When we are seeing the legacy architecture that were monolithics, that every time that you have to do a change on an update, you have to upgrade the entire software and the entire hardware. Doesn't make any more with the new technologies, right? Having a microservice architecture will allow you actually to just update or upgrade a specific part of your solution. And being in the cloud, for example, having a software as a service will allow the banks actually to forget about it and having the providers to do the updates within minutes, right? That in the past, that was something almost impossible. But not only that, right? When we're talking about big data, informational system, right? The capabilities to start ingesting information with much more granularity. In some cases, you can go deeper to the contractual information and having holistic solutions that are covering management and board reporting within the same model with the same assumption, etc. I think that's key for the banks.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we used to try very hard about. Sort of the level of information I present at the board versus the level of information I present at the trading desk, right? They're very different, right? But they better be implicitly the same.
Yeah.
If I add it all up and I get a different number, that doesn't work. And it's also this requirement to be able to maybe even do different stress tests or different analysis depending on who the ask is, right? The board's interested in where's my capital and is the bank going to be okay for the next 6 months, right? The trader wants to know, do I have the liquidity to do this now, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I'm thinking we've been through the area. We've looked at where the banks are right now. We've looked at the benefits of cloud, the scalability, the flexibility. I'm thinking as your clients and the industry look out for the next couple of years, what are the things that Mirai is focusing on that you think they should be worrying about or thinking about?
Well, I think that probably the next year the banks will be focused on adapting their models to regulatory reporting requirements, and also to start generating the new regulatory demands that are becoming from the regulators that are going to be a big ask. And also, I truly believe that banks are starting to having more interest in cloud native solutions because I think that they are seeing what is the benefit of having them, right? And this will allow them probably not only to getting a better performance, better cost, but also simplify the current data infrastructure that they have, right? Where they were investing a lot of money for being able actually to generate the LCR, SFR, monitoring metrics, etc., right? And right now, I think that there are good options in the markets to go over one unique solution that are covering both fronts.
Excellent. Yeah, I would totally agree with that. It's that kind of that shift away from it being a tax to a business benefit, right? And what do I get out of this? Rather than just fine, I can tick the form, but that didn't do anything. One of the things we're seeing, just as a final sort of question, thinking around over here in the US, obviously as a result of many of the things that happened recently, and I think I think it's global. It'd be interesting to get your viewpoint. Is we're seeing a lot of looking at the behavioral changes in the institution's client base, right? And it's a flip side of the other side of technology where rumor stroke information stroke sentiment moves much faster than it ever used to do, which means you need to respond quicker, back to your flexibility and response. And you also need to be looking at changing how you change your behavioral assumptions. The idea that a bank could lose 35% of its deposits in like 8 hours, it was insane.
But it happened.
Do you think that's something that people are starting to look at? I know the regulators here are. Is that something that you think is, this this use of the fact, realizing that yes, ALM is great, but I can also use it for my actual deposit management processes and my balance sheet management processes. Do you think that's a big thing for the next few years?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Mark, and I think that that's going to be a main focus for the coming years. And as I said at the beginning of the talk, yesterday I was in a meeting with an strategic consulting firm that they were emphasizing the importance of having the business, the liquidity reporting, and the IRBB management view aligned when we were talking about modeling a non-maturity deposit, right? And I think that that's a big thing. And not only that, right? Because with the artificial intelligence disruption and the technology that is available, I think that the banks can start looking of how these new methodologies and new algorithms can help them actually to improve the way that they are modeling non-maturity deposit or client behavior, right? And we had a really interesting talk about machine learning in the ALM and the ways that the client can start actually looking at it, starting from data clusterization, right? That's a huge thing, right? Is with artificial intelligence, the good thing is that you can add much more dimensionality to your models in order to have much more accurate models as well. And I think that that's going to be a good focus in the coming year for sure.
Interesting. Well, Elmo, I've really enjoyed our discussion today, and I think we've covered all sorts of topics. And yeah, we've valued our relationship with Mirai Advisory over the years and watching you grow. And as you start on this, going on the journey of, as we're saying, this need to be a platform that's cloud native, flexible. The industry itself moves to cloud native, flexible. So thank you so much again for your time today. I've really enjoyed the discussion. Lots of change in the past, and it sounds like much more change coming. Look forward to seeing where this all goes.
Have a good day. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much.